Both of the suspects in this week's terror attacks were Canadian-born, raising the question of a possible rise in homegrown terrorism. Jeffrey Dvorkin joins us to discuss this matter. He is director of the journalism program at the University of Toronto-Scarborough. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
You're a journalism professor, so let's start with the news itself. Canadian journalists have been getting a lot of praise for not overblowing this story, especially compared to American networks like CNN. Are Canadians too calm?
Well, they're not very calm these days. They're in a state of some shock. This is very unusual for Canada to have this kind of event, although for some people it's not a great surprise. There is a subculture of alienation and anger among certain segments of the population, and it's a population that's extremely diverse. Canada has had a very open immigration policy for many years, and people have come to Canada from many different countries.
There are reports that the suspect was known to Canadian authorities. Do we know if anything was done?
Apparently, he was kept under watch, but there was nothing that could be done under Canadian law. There was no preventative detention measures that could have been taken because he had not done anything. And you cannot hold someone for expressing ideas that are unpopular but if they are dangerous, my understanding is that the government will pass laws that will allow them to keep a closer eye on anyone who expresses some ideas that may be dangerous.
Sure. Prime Minister Stephen Harper is proposing the tightening of police and surveillance procedures to go after terrorists. How do you think that would go over with Canadians?
Well, I think Canadians would be a little bit nervous about that. On the one hand, they're eager to make sure that that there is more security around and that people have a heightened sense of anxiety after what's happened over the last few days. But there's also a very strong civil libertarian element in Canadian life and Canadian culture, and people would be a bit anxious to try to make a deal in which they exchange their liberties for more security. That would be a very difficult thing to sell to Canadians.
Sure, and as you mentioned, this is the second attack in a week's time. Are people there blaming radicalization, or do they think Canada sending jets to fight ISIL might be part of the problem?
Well, I think they are related. The Canadian government's policy has been very pro-American, very much in lockstep with what the Obama administration has been doing, and also the Harper government has been very strongly pro-Israel throughout the last 7 years of the Harper government. They have been in very close lockstep with Israeli policy, and I think that they have denied, the federal government has denied that this may have an impact, but I can't see how it doesn't.
Well, and to build on what you just said, in today's news conference, a reporter asked authorities about U.S. intelligence information. How closely are Canadian intelligence officials working with the agencies outside the country, or do you think they will be doing so even more?
Well, there is a very strong Canadian presence in the surveillance culture of the so-called Five Eyes, the United States, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. These five countries have collaborated very closely in surveillance issues. And I think that what will probably happen at this point is that that quality of surveillance not only will be heightened, but it will be seen to be heightened so that Canadians may feel a little more secure over the coming months and years.
All right, Jeffrey Dvorkin, thank you so much for joining us from Toronto. We appreciate your insight and perspective.